Seems like you found part 2. I'm Dwarven Cosplay and welcome to the shop. So once again, welcome back. Last video we did the sculpting part. And of course it weighs about 10 kilos now and it's way too heavy to use as a prop. So we're gonna make a cast out of latex and foam rubber, but first we need to make a mold. So we'll be making a 2-part mold, and that means of course that we'll have to make 2 parts. And for this we'll have to divide the head in half, and I'll be using these small plastics to do that. So I fill this cup with water and it's about 3/4 full. I'm gonna get my plaster and I'm just gonna sprinkle it inside of the water. I'm just gonna keep doing this until we get a little mountain on top. So about a minute later you can start stirring. And once you start turning, you don't want to add any more plaster because you'll get some clumps and this will just ruin your plaster. And the consistency should be something of a thick milk or a thin yogurt or some cream. And if you find the plaster still a little too watery, you'll just have to wait a little bit and it'll stiffen up basically. So the first layer we're going to do is just a thin layer of just plaster. And I'm gonna pour it on the side of the head. Just let it run. Hey, don't want to use your fingers or a brush because this will ruin the detail of the skull itself. The main thing you want to do is just use your mouth and blow. Another thing you can do is grab some plaster and just splash it around. This will make a mess, so you want to cover your work surface as well. So the first layer of plaster is done. I'm gonna let this dry just for a little bit, not completely. So the second layer, I'm gonna take my burlap, I cut it in some small pieces, gonna dip it inside of the plaster, gonna remove the excess, and then I'm gonna drape it on top of the head basically. You want to pat it down as best as you can, but not too hard so you don't push inside of the clay. If you're wondering why I'm using the burlap, it's because it adds some structure to the head and makes it a little bit stronger. Pure plaster, it'll probably crack and it's just not as safe as using this burlap. Now that the burlap layer is almost dry, I've made another batch. It's a little bit thicker this time, and that's because I'm gonna use it to make the divider and also to fill up the ears, the eyes and the nose. The front is done now. Now I'm gonna move to the back side. It's been about 2 hours since this has been dry, so it's a perfect opportunity to start with the back side. So now instead of a 10 kilo head, you have a 20 kilo head. But everything is covered now, made 2 parts of the mold. I also cleaned up the scene a little bit and this will be easier to demold in the next day. I'm just going to keep it here for 24 hours and come back to it tomorrow. And by one day I mean 2 weeks. So the next thing we're going to do is crack the mold open. I've got the chisel and the hammer. I'm just going to place my chisel on the divider. I'm going to start lightly tapping. I'm going to wait for a crack to appear. I'm just going to slowly work my way down, just light taps, and you see that the crack is just starting to appear here. got a pot of water here. I'm gonna use the water. I'm gonna let it drip between the plaster mold and the clay, and this will slowly release the clay from the mold. So when removing the clay, you'll have to be very careful because you don't want to damage the plaster itself. So when you removed most of the clay, you can use a brush and some water and use this to clean out the mold. I've got some small holes in the plaster. I'm gonna use some of the same clay to fill them up. I've removed all the clay from the mold. Now it looks something like this. So after we made the cast, we need something to release it. And that's why we're gonna make some mold release. And I've got a cup of water here and some brown soap, and I'm gonna mix them together, and I'll show the consistency over here. The ratio of water and soap should be 1 to 1. So now that I've added the mold release, we're gonna start with the latex. And this latex is available at the cosplay shop. You can get it in 500 ml, a liter and 5 liters. I'm also gonna mix it with some paint, and we're just gonna rotocast it. So I have added some paint to the latex, and this is just some base color. So when we do the painting later on, it'll be a little easier to paint on top of it. So for rotocasting, we're just gonna pour the latex inside the mold. We're gonna pick the mold up and just shake it and rotate it until it covers everything inside of the mold. And just to speed it up, I'm gonna use a hairdryer. So I've decided to add about 5 layers of latex, and now I'm gonna join the two halves together. So I've got some toilet paper. I'm just gonna pull it apart so we have some thinner sheets. So I'm just gonna place my sheets of toilet paper on the gap. So the latex has dried now. It's about between 5 and 7 layers, and the next part is the soft expanding foam, which you can also buy at the cosplay shop. And this is a 2 to 1 ratio, so we're gonna mix it together and pour it inside, and it will expand. So you've got about half a minute of mixing time before the foam starts to expand, so you need to be a little quick. So we're gonna mix some smaller batches first to fill the mouth and the ears, and this is so when we fill the rest of the head we don't get air pockets in the mouth and ears. After the small batches we're gonna make some bigger batches until the head is completely filled. I wanted to get it out without having to break the mold, but sadly enough I had to break it because it was stuck in too many places, and yeah. I've got some problems with the ears, but it's fixable as well, and it's a dead monster, so it's not a big problem. Same goes for the mold line, it's fixable as well. But yeah, I'm quite happy with how it's turned out. And I'm gonna clean it up and fix the mistakes with some latex and some knives, and after that we're gonna go to the painting process. We are starting with the painting process. I'm using acrylic paints. These are Golden Open Series paints, and I use these because they have slower drying time and they're a little more flexible than normal acrylic paints. You can also use the paint the cosplay shop offers. They're on the site as well. And I'm gonna start with the ground layer, just the basic color, which is a bluish green, and I'm gonna work on from that. I also use a red paint for the gums, the lips, around the eyes, and also to paint on the scars. So referring back to the little holes we had in the mold, they are visible on the cast itself, but I use some red paint and basically make some wounds of them. I mix some white with some yellow ochre for the eyes and the teeth as well. The eyes are a little brighter, so a little more white, and the teeth are a little darker, so a little bit of dark brown and a little more ochre. I think this is the most creative part of the whole process, so you can let your creativity go and just go wild. So the painting is done, that means the head is done. And well, this is the finished product. It's very lightweight, looks great for shoots, it's fun to take around at cons. Also probably gonna take some rope and bind it on the head itself, so you have something to grab it with and drag along with you. So this is the end of the video. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment and share with your friends. And now if you will excuse me, I'm gonna hunt some more monsters.